Jesus said to the disciples, "For it is as if a man going on a journey summoned his slaves and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to one he gave 2, and to another 1, each according to their ability. Then he went away. The one who had received the 5 talents went off at once and traded with them, and made 5 more talents. In the same way, the one who had 2 talents made 2 more talents. But the one who had received the 1 talent went off and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. Then the one who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 more talents, saying, 'Master, you handed over to me 5 talents. See, I have made 5 more talents.' His master said to him, 'Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master.' And the one with 2 talents also came forward, saying, 'Master, you handed over to me 2 talents. See, I have made 2 more talents.' His master said to him, 'Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master.' Then the one who had received the 1 talent also came forward, saying, 'Master, I knew that you were a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you did not scatter seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, you have what is yours.' But his master replied, 'You wicked and lazy slave, you knew, did you, that I reap where I did not sow and gather where I did not scatter? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and on my return I would have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to the one with the 10 talents, for to all those who have, more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. As for this worthless slave, throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Okay, we only have 1 more week of Matthew and his weeping and gnashing of teeth. He loves that phrase. So some of you perhaps will have to forgive me for using a football analogy, but something that drives me nuts when watching football, which I watch too much of, is if my team plays not to lose rather than to win. I feel like that, yeah, Jason knows, right? Yeah. I feel like that's what the third servant in today's parable does. He buries the talent that he is given for fear of losing. He doesn't go all out. He doesn't risk. He plays it safe because he is afraid. Fear has such an ability to take hold in our lives. We are so susceptible to its power. Fear was in biblical times and still is a driving force in our lives, in our world. And you know what are the 2 most prominent places in the Christ story where we find fear? Come on, guess. The 2 that most of you know. Okay, that's a fear one. I was thinking Christmas, right? The Christmas story, fear not, fear not. And the other one, Easter. In those 2 stories, we hear, fear not. Do not be afraid. Not, by the way, in the Pentecost story. Maybe that's why that's my favorite High Holy Day. Maybe it means that once the Spirit comes, we have the presence within and among us that can cast out fear. But you know what else is in both the Christmas and Easter stories? That's also in the parable we hear today in Matthew. Joy. Joy. The two servants who live without fear, or at least without letting fear control how they live, what they do control how they live and what they do with the talents entrusted to them, they enter into, what did it say? The joy. They enter into the joy of their master. Fear, it seems to me, steals away our joy. Another problem with fear is that it distorts the truth. It distorts our view of reality. Brian Nelson, who's here this morning, likes to use the acronym FEAR, false emotions appearing real. Isn't that what happens to the third servant? When called before the master to share what he has done with the one talent he has been given, a talent was worth 15 to 20 years' wages, something way beyond the comprehension of any of Jesus' listeners, a superabundance that they never dreamed of seeing, let alone being entrusted with. The third servant says, I knew that you were a harsh man, reaping where you do not sow and gathering where you did not scatter seed. So I was afraid, and I went and I hid your talent in the ground. There is no evidence that the master was any of these things. It says that a man going on a journey entrusted his property to these three servants. I hear the master sarcastically calling him out on his false understanding. You knew, did you? Really? You knew? Based on what did you decide that this was true? And if that is really what you thought, then why didn't you at least do something? We see how one, fear distorted his view of the master, false emotions appearing real, and then two, how his fear was something he used to try to blame the master for his own playing, not to lose rather than to win. I don't mean here like win at all, like our culture, win at all cost. Like everything is about winning. It's not that. But it is about risking to live. Like that Mary Oliver line, way overused, but probably because we need to continually be reminded of it. What will you do with your one wild, precious life? Or as Frodo laments to Gandalf in the first Lord of the Rings film, I wish the ring had never come to me. Gandalf replies, so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. The talents in the parable are not just about money. They are about all that God has entrusted to us to care for, to do something with. Time, our bodies, creation, relationships, justice, our gifts, resources, yes, including money. In this country, we might add democracy, our children, our very lives. What will we do with these gifts of abundance we are entrusted with? Will we play not to lose them? In which case, some of them, like creation as we've known it, justice, democracy, relationships, will suffer or even be lost. Or will we risk going all in and according to the parable experience an increase in talents and an increase in joy? So I watched an episode of the kids' cartoon program Arthur this week. That was never one that we watched, my kids and I. But at the suggestion of Pastor Carlson, who remembers reading this book to his kids, I found it online and watched it. So it's called DW and the Library Card. Any of you kids seen it? Oh, somebody over here seen it? Natalie, you guys have watched that? Well, you can watch it online with your kids or watch it yourselves. Okay, so DW is Arthur's little sister. And they're at the library, and DW sees this book, Hop Along Frog, and she wants it, but she doesn't have a library card. So she tries to get her big brother, Arthur, to check out the book for her. But he won't do it because he's afraid. Others will see him checking out a baby book. I think he even has a nightmare about that, thinking, they're only going to let me check out baby books from now on. His fear, you're going to notice how many times fear is in this story, his fears of what others might think of him prevent him from helping out his sister and bringing her joy. But then DW learns that she is old enough to get her own card. She just has to write her full name, Dora Winifred Reed. Her fear that she won't be able to write such a long, complicated name makes her angry at her parents, blaming them for not giving her an easier name to spell. Especially when the terrible twins play on her fears and enlarge them. You can't write your name. But with her parents' encouragement, she does it. When she went to the library to get her card, she was afraid she might not only forget how to spell that name, but she might forget her name, period. But we'll say she prayed. And she did it. She remembered her name. She wrote it. She got her card, and now she could take out Hop Along Frog. She felt empowered. And she went to get the book, but guess what? It had been checked out. So every day, she had her mom call the library, or she stopped by the library to see if it had been returned. She struggled with her fears that it would never be returned. That Saturday, the due date, she was afraid would never come. But she held on. She held on to hope. And she went to the library next Saturday. Guess who had the book? The terrible twins. All those people and things in our life that try to steal away our joy. But DW hadn't given up. The twins had returned it. She checks out the book. But as she is leaving with it, the terrible twins throw out this threat. If you hurt that book, they'll take away your library card forever. Sounds like being thrown weeping and gnashing in teeth, right, into the darkness. And you know what happens? DW becomes the third servant of our parable. She buries this talent, this gift entrusted to her, and with it, she buries her joy. She is so afraid of losing her library card forever, false emotions appearing real, that she doesn't read the book. She has nightmares about it. And the day Arthur reminds her that it's due, she brings it out from where she has hidden it, wrapped in a cloth in a box that she carries with oven mitts on. Arthur asks her, what exactly is going on? And she shares everything. And Arthur enters her fear to let her know, you can renew the book, and she isn't going to lose her card. And finally, D.W. hears the story of Hopalong Frog that she's been waiting for when Arthur reads it to her. And in opening the book, he realizes that this was his first library book. His name is back there where he signed it out, and he shares in D.W.'s joy, remembering, I love this book. His fear of reading baby books is overcome as he extends himself for his sister. And D.W. realizes that her fear of losing her library card forever was indeed a false emotion appearing real. She gave too much power over to those terrible twins who played on her fears so that she buried the gift and with it her joy. But now her fear is overcome and her joy is restored. We have 5 people reaffirming their baptism today. Jane at this service, the other 4 at the next service, as they weren't able to be here back in October. And Arlo is getting baptized at the second service. The gift of getting baptized and remembering our baptism is identity, knowing who we are, receiving and trusting the power of Christ that we receive and the power of our faith community to help us live out that given identity so that we can act, so that we can live fully our one wild, precious life without fear, or sometimes with fear, but empowered to act anyhow, to risk having a larger life for the greater good and experiencing the joy of the Master, the joy of living, not so that we don't lose, but so that we win the fullness of the joy that God has freely offered to us all. In Jesus' name, amen.